Discover 10 incredible medieval heating techniques that are so effective they might outperform your modern furnace. From ingenious fireplace designs to ancient insulation methods, these forgotten strategies kept castles and cottages warm through brutal winters. Learn about the resourcefulness of medieval innovators and see how these techniques could inspire sustainable heating solutions today. If you're fascinated by the creativity of the past or looking for unique ways to stay warm, this video is for you. Don't forget to hit the like button, share with friends, and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating historical insights and tips. 1. Central hearths, the heart of medieval warmth. Picture this for a moment. Instead of a fireplace nestled against the far wall of your living room, imagine a large, open fire pit smack dab in the center of the room. That was the secret to medieval central hearths. By placing the fire in the middle of the main living area, heat could radiate evenly in all directions. It wasn't just heating one side of the house, it was serving as a literal nucleus of warmth. And it wasn't just about warmth. The stones around the hearth were like little thermal batteries. They absorbed heat from the fire during the day or evening, and long after the flames died down, the stones continued to radiate that stored warmth. It's a concept that's applied in modern buildings using thermal mass to regulate temperature. But back then, they figured it out without blueprints or computers. Of course, there was a major downside. Chimneys, as we know them, didn't become widespread until the late medieval period. This meant all the smoke from the fire collected inside the house before drifting out through small openings or vents. It must have been hard to breathe in that smoky atmosphere and deal with soot-covered interiors, but the trade-off was warmth and survival. What I find most endearing about the hearth is its social role. It wasn't just the physical center of the home, it was the emotional heart too. Families gathered around the fire to eat, cook, and share stories at the end of the day. It wasn't just a heat source, it was a source of connection and tradition. How's that for warmth? 2. Solar heating, harnessing the power of the sun. When I think about solar heating, it sounds more like a 21st century climate solution than a medieval innovation. But it turns out medieval builders were using solar principles long before solar panels became a thing. They may not have had photovoltaic cells, but they knew how to make the sun work for them. Homes were often designed to maximize sun exposure, with large south-facing windows. During the day, sunlight poured through those windows to naturally warm the living spaces. But the real magic happened when thick stone or clay walls absorbed the heat and held onto it. By nighttime, those walls would slowly release the stored warmth, keeping the chill at bay. Essentially, they built homes equipped with early versions of passive solar heating. Since glass windows weren't common for most people, peasants got creative with their setups. On sunny days, they'd open up doors or shutters to welcome the sunlight, using their homes almost like large greenhouses to trap heat. I love how resourceful this idea is because, even today, you can use similar methods to warm up your living spaces and save on energy bills. For insulation, they relied on nature's gifts like wood, straw, or even partially buried homes, which used the Earth's natural insulating properties to keep the warmth in and the cold out. The attention to detail is truly inspiring. They worked with what they had and made it work brilliantly. 3. Thatched roofs, nature's insulation. I'll admit, when I think of thatched roofs, the first image that pops into my mind is a quaint little cottage from a fairy tale. But these beautifully rustic roofs weren't just for show, they were engineering marvels. Thatching involved tightly bundling layers of straw, or sometimes reeds, to create a dense, insulated roof. Believe it or not, straw is a fantastic thermal insulator. It traps tiny pockets of air which help retain heat inside the home during winter, while also keeping things cool in the summer. No wonder this technique persisted for centuries. What I love about thatched roofs is how reliant they were on community effort. Constructing and maintaining them wasn't a single-person job. Entire villages might come together to help one family repair or rebuild their roof. It wasn't just about keeping the cold out, it was about building relationships and strengthening bonds. The downside? Straw wasn't the most durable material. Over time, it would start to rot and attract pests, so regular maintenance was unavoidable. Even with the drawbacks, though, it's amazing how effective these roofs were at keeping the warmth generated by hearths and solar heating from escaping. It's proof that sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. 4. Livestock heating, animals as natural heaters. Here's a method that's both ingenious and a bit unconventional. Medieval homes often kept their livestock close, literally, under the same roof. That's right, the cows and sheep weren't just for milk and wool, they doubled as makeshift space heaters. Animals produce a surprising amount of body heat, and by housing them in attached stables or even under the same floor as the living quarters, their warmth would naturally rise and keep the house cozy. Imagine living above a barn, but instead of complaining about the farm smells, you were thankful for the heat. And it didn't stop there. Manure, yes, manure, was also repurposed as a fuel source for fires. Believe it or not, dried animal dung burns quite effectively. It's another example of how nothing went to waste in those times. The downsides, of course, were pretty obvious. Living close to animals meant dealing with their smells, noises, and insects. But for the medieval family, the added warmth and resources outweighed the inconvenience. When winter stretched on and temperatures plummeted, having cows and sheep nearby could make all the difference. 5. Heated floors, warmth underfoot. This idea absolutely blew my mind when I first learned about it. Heated floors in the medieval period? Surely not. But yes, they had their own version of underfloor heating, and it was as practical as it was comforting. Here's how it worked. Large stones were heated in the central hearth until they were scalding hot. These stones were then placed under the floorboards or laid directly underneath dirt floors, where they would slowly release their warmth. Some medieval homes even opted for clay or brick flooring, which retained heat better and radiated it for hours. Pretty incredible, right? Not only did this provide warm feet for those trudging around the house, but it also served another purpose. The warmth helped keep the floors dry and reduced household dampness, which meant fewer illnesses caused by cold, wet conditions. Of course, this technique required constant effort. Someone had to keep heating and rotating the stones for the system to work effectively. When you consider the comfort and health benefits during the frigid winters, it's easy to see why people went through the trouble. 6. Portable warmers, stones, and chaufettes. Let me tell you something. Back in the medieval days when frost bit your fingertips and the wind howled like a banshee through every crack and crevice, people didn't have central heating. But that didn't mean they froze. Nope, they got clever. One of the simplest yet most effective heating tricks involved the use of portable warmers. And trust me, it's a method that still works like a charm, especially if you're ever stuck without power. First up, heated stones. Folks back then would select large, smooth river stones and nestle them deep in the embers of a fire until they soaked up enough heat to practically sizzle. Once hot, they'd wrap the stones in layers of cloth or burlap to avoid burns, and carry them with them, tucked under cloaks, placed at their feet in bed, or even held in their laps while traveling by cart. The warmth radiated for hours, acting like a primitive hot water bottle, and it made a world of difference on long, icy journeys. Then there were chaufettes, small metal containers that held embers or bits of charcoal. Picture a miniature fire pit, but portable. People carried these in carriages, kept them under tables, or held them in their laps to warm hands and legs. They had to be handled with care, no open flames, and nothing that could easily catch fire nearby. But when used properly, chaufettes were a lifesaver. There were dangers, of course. Overheating a stone could cause it to crack, or worse, burn someone if the wrapping wore thin. And chaufettes, though efficient, could smolder dangerously if left unattended. But the brilliance of these techniques lies in their practicality and simplicity. You didn't need fancy tech, just common sense, fire, and a bit of fabric. And honestly, I think we could all stand to remember these old tricks. Sometimes, the old ways really are the best. 7. Bed warmers, warming pans and canopy beds. When you've lived through a winter in a drafty old house, one where you can see your breath indoors, you start to understand why medieval folks went the extra mile to keep warm at night. One method I've always admired was the use of bed warmers, a simple, clever practice that made climbing into bed feel a little less like jumping into a snowbank. Imagine this. It's the dead of winter. You've got a hay-stuffed mattress, wool blankets, and your breath is fogging up in the moonlight. Before you slip into bed, someone takes a warming pan, a metal container filled with glowing coals or embers, and slides it between the sheets. Slowly, carefully, they move it around to take the chill out of the bed. After a few minutes, they remove it, and you're left with a gloriously toasty nest to curl up in. Of course, there were risks. Embers are unpredictable, and a careless move could set straw ticking or wool blankets ablaze. But done right, it was a game changer. And for extra comfort, they often slept in canopy beds with heavy curtains drawn around them. These weren't just decorative. They were functional barriers that trapped body heat and shielded sleepers from drafts. A couple sharing a bed under a thick canopy could keep each other warm through the coldest of nights, with little more than their shared heat and the thick enclosure. Now, I'll admit, sleeping on a hay mattress had its drawbacks, like attracting mice or bugs. But when survival outweighed luxury, warmth came first. I sometimes think we've lost that primal instinct to make do and find comfort in what's available. And there's something beautifully human about it, about fighting off winter with embers and closeness. 8. Heat reflectors, amplifying warmth. If there's one medieval trick that more people should know about today, it's the use of heat reflectors. I'll never forget the first time I experimented with this myself, placing a large piece of foil-covered board behind my wood stove, and the difference it made was almost magical. But medieval folks were doing it centuries before, and they did it with style. The concept is simple. Fire gives off heat in all directions, but you don't always want it wasted by radiating into the back wall or corners of a room. So, medieval households used polished metal or smooth stone reflectors to bounce that heat back into the living space. Some of these reflectors were even beautifully decorated, blending form and function in a way that modern gadgets rarely do. Positioning was everything. Too close to the fire, and the reflector could become dangerously hot. Too far, and the effect diminished. But when placed just right, it meant that every log burned went further. Less wood was needed, the space warmed faster, and walls were protected from the long-term damage caused by constant heat exposure. This technique wasn't just about efficiency, it was about understanding how to make nature work for you. Reflectors turned a single fire into a more powerful source of warmth without any additional fuel. And when you're chopping and hauling your own firewood in sub-zero temperatures, every bit of saved effort matters. What I love most about this method is that it's still usable today, especially for anyone with a fireplace or wood stove. It's one of those old-world hacks that feels just as smart and just as cozy now as it did hundreds of years ago. 9. Communal bonfires, warming bodies and souls. There's something deeply soulful about gathering around a fire with others. I've done it on camping trips, during blackouts, and once during a particularly brutal ice storm. But in the medieval world, communal bonfires weren't just social, they were survival. During the harshest months, especially in small villages, bonfires would be built in central squares, burning bright against the long, dark nights. These weren't just for warmth, though they provided plenty of that. They were for community, for connection. People would come together to share stories, sing songs, cook food, and simply be present with one another. Imagine the comfort of stepping out of a freezing house and being greeted by familiar faces around a glowing blaze. That's the kind of warmth no furnace can offer. These bonfires played a vital role in major seasonal festivals too. Think Yule, a celebration of the winter solstice, when the longest night marked the turning of the year. Bonfires lit up the dark, symbolizing hope and renewal. People would feast, dance, and celebrate together, even when times were hard, even when food was scarce. In a world with so little margin for error, joy was just as essential as shelter. And the fire was more than symbolic. It provided a real, physical heating station for villagers who might have otherwise gone without. There were no electric blankets or heated buildings, so a communal blaze could mean the difference between a tolerable night and a deadly one. We might not need village bonfires to survive anymore, but I think we've lost something when we stopped making time for that kind of gathering. There's healing in shared warmth, and sometimes what keeps us going in winter isn't just fire, it's each other. 10. Resilience and creativity of medieval peasants. When I think about all these techniques, the heated stones, warming pans, the reflectors and bonfires, I can't help but marvel at the sheer resilience of medieval peasants. These folks didn't have thermostats or backup generators. They had to rely on their own grit, their community, and their connection to nature to make it through the winter. And you know what? They did it with ingenuity, heart, and even joy. They used what they had: hay for bedding, embers for heat, stones for portability. They shared warmth with neighbors, celebrated the seasons, and understood that surviving winter was not a solo act. It was collective. They took care of one another, and that kind of support system was as vital as any hearth fire. What strikes me most is how they turned necessity into art. Fire reflectors became decorative, canopy beds turned into family heirlooms, bonfires became spiritual events. It wasn't just about keeping warm, it was about doing it in a way that fed the soul as much as the body. And I think there are powerful lessons for us here. In a world where so much is disposable and impersonal, these old techniques remind us of the value of effort, creativity, and togetherness. When the power goes out or the cold creeps in, maybe we don't need to panic. Maybe we just need to remember what our ancestors knew: how to live with the seasons, not fight them. How to share, adapt, and find comfort in simple things. So the next time the wind howls outside your window, think of the peasants who made it through far worse with far less, and take heart. They may have lived centuries ago, but their wisdom still warms us today.